What we want to cover today with you is you've had the welcome from Sam. Adam's going to just then spend a little bit of time talking about the current share formula, only very briefly, but just so that you're aware of where we are at the moment before starting to look at where we're going to. Then Adam will just go through why the decision has been made to change things. And then we'll introduce the key principles of the new formula. So I'll start that off, and then Sandra will go through in detail all of the different principles. After that, I'll talk a little bit about the advantages of the new formula and what will happen next. Then we've got a video message for us all from Archdeacon Andy, and then we're going to hand over to you all for any questions that you might have. So please do, if you've got anything that comes up while you're hearing things, please do, make a little note for yourselves if you don't want to forget anything, but there will be that opportunity for questions at the end. As well as asking for people to put their hands up, we're also going to ask people to put questions in the chat, and Adam will be going through those and read those out. So if you don't want to ask a question out loud yourself, then please do just type it into the chat, and we'll make sure that your question is picked up that way. And then once we've gone through all the questions, we've just got again a short reflection from Archdeacon Andy to finish our time together today. So without further ado, I'll move us on and hand over to Adam, who's going to talk a little bit about the current share formula. Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. Yeah, this is just the journey we've been on really to this point. So since about 2008, the current share formula has been in place. And as you can see from that slide, that's been really based upon once the budget's been set by the DBF, then the total amount required from share, which then takes into account the fact that we've got other income, say from the representative bodies, block grant or parsonage board rental income, etc. But once the share figure has been agreed, you'll remember that this has usually just been divided into two elements, 50-50. So 50% clergy cost, 50% based on average over 18 Sunday attendance. And that has been done based on the first element, the clergy element, but on the full-time equivalent number of clergy across the whole diocese, if you like, as agreed by bishop staff ahead of the new year. And that has produced what's effectively a nominal cost per cleric. So it's always just been half of the share figure divided by the number of clergy. So it's not the actual cost of employing a cleric. And so that nominal sum in 2022, as you can see, was £27,643. And then obviously each mission area's allocation of clergy, full-time equivalent clergy, would be multiplied by that figure. So that produced 50%. And then the other 50% was taken from average Sunday attendance. And again, as you might well remember, this was based on the annual returns submitted by the church wardens. And then to smooth that figure, it was taking an average over a 3-year period. So again, it was a nominal sum, if you like, because it was the other half of the share total divided by those attendance figures. And that produced in 2022 £384.42 per attendee. So that was, if you like, the principles behind the share formula from 2008 until 2022. So producing these nominal figures for clergy and attendance. But as we'll see from the next slide, you'll see that clearly, particularly hastened by the pandemic, things have changed over the last couple of years, and this is why we're now looking for a new formula going forward. So why did we need to change it? Well, firstly, the Sunday attendance is increasingly only a limited measure of life in our churches. We have midweek services, we have other opportunities for engagement with the life of the church, such as prayer meetings or home groups, social action, all opportunities for people engaging as part of their church community. So Sunday attendance a limited measure of what's really happening in our church families. Secondly, with COVID and the pandemic and our churches being closed, the attendance patterns have changed significantly. And so when looking at that 3-year average, if you like, the oldest data available was totally different and almost now had no relevance to our current situation, as I'm sure you've all noticed in your congregations. So not only that, but we didn't complete our annual returns for 2020 and 2021 attendance. So that data wasn't actually available to use. And so that figure I quoted earlier for 2022 is actually based on 2018 and 19 data, which is old and pre-pandemic and even less relevant to where we are now. So that's two major reasons, but also it's become increasingly clear, really, views have been expressed strongly that the current formula is a disincentive to growth. So by including such a weighting on attendance, the feeling is that should more people then arrive in our churches, there's an instant need to pay more share and have a greater amount payable from the church that's growing. So yeah, it's a disincentive to grow in terms of immediate cost, if you like, financially. And then those last 2 points on the slide there, also in the current formula, there's no consideration given to the size of the mission field around each church, the communities we're placed in to make Jesus known, and potentially to engage with the church, with our local church. So that's not been factored in. And likewise, no consideration was given to different financial situations for the different mission areas. The finance team meet annually with the treasurers to talk about share within a mission area. And so that factors in different individual church situations locally, financially, but that overall picture, if you like, mission area finances across the diocese was not factored in. And obviously that can be very different. So there was no comparative, a factor, if you like, for what situations each mission area was actually in. So that is where we are. And that leads us on now to talk about what we're going to do now. So I'll hand back to Diane for the principles.
Thank you, Adam. And I should say that the new share formula that's been approved by the Board of Finance and by the Standing Committee, there was a working group that was made up of lay people and clergy from across the diocese, representing all 3 archdeaconries, a good sprinkling of treasurers and other people on that. And it was that group that worked through some of the challenges and agreed the key principles that I'm going to share with you now. So these are the 7 key principles of the new mission area share formula, and we will be going through these in more detail. So the first principle is that the mission areas will pay for frontline ministry, ordained and lay. Central funds, so the money received from the representative body of the Church in Wales and diocesan funds, will cover the support costs. We will remove the Sunday attendance element of the formula for the reasons that Adam's outlined. Then we will introduce a factor for the ability to pay. There'll be a factor that considers the population, so the size of the mission field. There will be a minimum charge, a minimum cost for each church building, reflecting the fact that every building, whether it's large or small, however often it's used, does bring with it a certain cost base. And there will be limits on the size of annual increases and decreases for the mission areas in an effort to provide some form of financial stability at what I think we'd all agree has been a really challenging financial time and looks like it's going to continue to be so. So those are the 7 key principles, and I'm now going to ask Sandra to go through each of those in more detail for you.
Thank you, Diane. Good afternoon, everybody. The first key principle for the new share formula is a division between the central cost and the frontline ministry. The working group in the DBF were quite clear on that the mission areas should be paying for the frontline ministry. Now, this is quite a large portion of it, so I'll go into this in a bit more detail on the next slide. But the frontline ministry is divided into two parts. First of those is the actual stipendiary clergy cost, and the second of those is the other ministry cost. And it's these two elements of frontline ministry that the new mission area share formula will cover. If we move on to the next slide, Diane, I'll talk a little bit more about the two different costs there. So the first is the stipendiary clergy cost. Now this encompasses the clergy salary, the national insurance, the clergy council tax, and their housing maintenance cost. Now, the new share formula divides the actual cost of these items between the mission areas based on the number of clergy, and this includes full-time and part-time. Going back to what Adam said earlier, in the past it's been a notional cost per cleric, but in the new formula it will actually reflect the actual cost of those clergy stipends and other on-costs. Just to put it into context, 75% of the frontline ministry cost goes on this stipendiary clergy element. The other part, I can have the second slide, the other part of the frontline ministry are other costs, which cover 25% of the total ministry costs. Now this includes archdeacons, curates, chaplains and evangelists, and the cost of clergy relocations within the diocese. It will also cover other areas such as youth work, missionary leader expenses, missionary support, church inspections and faculties. The developing steering group also comes under this heading, which is the team that nurtures new lay and ordained ministry and provides training for our clergy. It also covers the work we do in the community through our social engagement work. It supports the cathedral as the mother church of the diocese and the work of the standing committee and the diocesan conference. So that's the key principle one, and these are the elements that the mission area share will be covering. The second key principle is the central funds will cover the support costs. Now, central funding comes from the representative body and the income from the Diocesan Board of Finance Investments. And this will be earmarked to cover the central costs. This includes the costs of running the diocesan office, the diocesan staff salary and managing our properties and investments. It will also cover funding for our mission, growth and evangelism fund projects, such as the hub churches that you'll have heard about, obviously. We also provide the grants for mission areas to support training, community mission and outreach and youth engagement projects. This central funding will also cover the important work by the nurturing group supporting our 50 church schools. So just to reiterate that the mission, the share will be covering the frontline ministry, but in this case it will be the representative body and our investments that will cover these central costs. Next slide, please, Diane. I just want to talk now about how then how we apportion the mission area share. As Adam said earlier, in the past it's been based on a 50% for clergy numbers and 50% for attendance. And as you see here, the principle there is that that Sunday attendance will no longer be part of the share calculation. The next key principle is one of the factors, one of the principles that will then actually form part of the share calculation and replace that Sunday attendance, and that's the ability to pay. Our mission areas and our churches have widely differing levels of financial resource, and it's a gospel imperative that the financially strong should support those who have less so that we can all flourish. As a result, there will be a factor within the calculation that takes into account unrestricted cash and assets. And this is based on the figures reported by the mission areas in their annual accounts. Obviously, some of these assets are property, but that isn't included, recognising the fact that they are not liquid assets and often they provide an income in their own right. We hope this will encourage people to make better use of their resources and how they can support our mission. The next factor that's going to be introduced as part of the formula is the population. Here we're trying to look more widely at the rural areas and urban areas and how that affects the life of the church. The population figures for each mission area is available on the diocesan website. This information has been provided by the Office for National Statistics and has been analysed for us by the Church Army. As I say, on the website, you'll be able to click on your individual mission areas and see what that data looks like. Population data will help us focus our attention on the wider mission field rather than constantly looking inwards. And this also feeds into our opportunities for growth. Inclusion of population should also make the calculation more equitable across rural and urban areas. Next slide, please, Diane. The final addition to the calculation is a minimum cost for each building. Each church building brings a certain level of fixed cost, regardless of how small or large it is, and the size of the congregation and how frequently it is used. A notional cost of £500 per church building will be charged through the mission area share formula to reflect this. They were the new items that are being included in the calculation for the share. DBF also recognised, and we did go out with a questionnaire to the mission areas to ask this, and it was positively received, that in uncertain times it's helpful for the mission areas to be able to plan and budget by knowing that there won't be any large increases or decreases in the share from year to year. So the DBF agreed that there should be no greater increase than 7% in any one year and no greater decrease than 7% in any one year. Any shortfall that this cap and collar produces will be met by the DBF from its reserves. Thank you very much. If I hand back to Diane now, she'll talk a little bit more about the advantages of these new principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. So when the working group worked through these ideas, these are some of the advantages that we felt there were in making these quite significant changes to the share formula. Firstly, is that it encourages growth by removing attendance. And it has been a constant concern that, you know, we've talked a lot about growth, and it is essential for us if we are to have a healthy and flourishing church, but mainly because we want more people to know the love of Christ in their lives. And therefore, it doesn't make any sense for there to be a financial cost when people do this successfully. So we hope that by removing attendance, there is now no disincentive to growth, and indeed every reason for people to encourage as many people to participate in the life of their local church and their mission area in whatever way, not just through Sunday attendance, but through all the various other ways that church is expressed in its local context. It supports the strategic vision. You'll, I hope, all have had a copy of Bishop Gregory's manifesto, launching our new growing faith, bringing hope and demonstrating love. And the formula, we believe, is really rooted in the gospel values. And we'll hear a little bit more from Archdeacon Andy on that in a short while. We believe that it gives us every reason, as I said, to draw new people into the life of the Taily Asaph, and to do that in a way that clearly demonstrates the love that Christ shows to all of us. We believe that over time it has the potential to support a really exciting culture change. There is now a strong incentive to grow, to draw as many people as possible into the life of our churches and communities. It encourages us to look out to the mission field. So rather than always looking internally, to actually look out to the communities that we're called to serve. Some of you will remember that when we launched Unlocking Our Potential, Philip Chu, who was the vicar of in one of the groupings in Dyffryn Clwyd mission area at the time, had this wonderful image of, rather than standing at the front of our churches looking down us at the pews and looking internally, we should throw open the doors and look out at the communities that we live our lives in and that we're called to serve. We believe it will encourage a continuing strategic review of buildings, which is already underway in all of our mission areas now, so that we really look at the purpose and the distinctive focus of each one of our buildings, not just our churches, but all the other residential properties, church halls, etc., that we own. And we would include our church schools within that as well. It's built on the gospel imperative that the financially strong will support others in the hope that all will flourish, and recognising that we're all blessed differently, and that fair is not always the same as equal. And finally, importantly, we hope it will offer stability by limiting increases and decreases. And I think particularly in the months since the short formula was agreed, what we've seen happen to inflation and other cost increases, notably energy, of course, I think makes that even more important as we try to navigate our way through the current challenges. So, what will happen next? Well, the new share formula has already been proposed by the Board of Finance and approved by the Standing Committee of the Diocesan Conference back in June. So on the 13th of September, which is a week today, the Board of Finance will be presented with the draft diocesan budgets for 2023 and will approve that subject to any amendments or any changes that it instructs the finance team to make. The following week, on the 22nd of September, it is the Standing Committee that has the final say as to whether that budget is accepted and implemented in 2023. And as soon as possible after that meeting, I've put the next day in here, work will start then on creating each mission area's individual share calculation. And as we do every year, we'll produce different options for consideration. The Diocesan Conference will formally receive the budget and the proposals for 2023 when it meets on the 8th of October. And then the following Monday, the conference is on the Saturday, on the following Monday, the mission area finance meetings start. We've already, I think, booked nearly 75% of those meetings in. So the mission area treasurers and church treasurers are gearing up ready for that. And that's when we'll start to look at the individual detail once the overall picture has been confirmed as to what that will mean for each of our mission areas, and talk through the fairest way to share out that overall mission area requirements amongst the churches that make up the mission area.